Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the Intern Expo. I am Lindy Boostabad, and I am currently a fraud solutions intern in fraud and security intelligence here at SAS, specifically on the domain and delivery enablement team. And you can see that I'm currently attending Davidson College. I will be a senior in a couple weeks, and that's getting harder and harder to say every time I have to say it. I will hopefully be graduating this spring in May of 2021 with a degree in math and a minor in computer science. You can see some things about me, some of my interests and hobbies. Two big things about me. Outside of technical work, I really love to dance. I was a ballerina in high school, and I'm currently the manager and one of the choreographers for Davidson's dance company. I'm also passionate about fighting crime and catching bad guys. I'm so thankful to have been able to intern for the Fraud and Security Intelligence Division this summer at SAS and continue to follow my passions. If we share any of the same interests, I'd love to connect and hear more from you after the expo. You'll also see some logistics information on this slide. So a few housekeeping things before I dive into the formal part of my presentation. I want you to know that I welcome you to turn on your webcam during the Q&A section. I've got about 20 to 25 minutes of content that I'm going to share, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. If you are comfortable turning on your webcam, that would be excellent. So let's dive into the formal part of my presentation and look a little bit more at the project I worked on during my internship. As I mentioned, I'm part of the domain and delivery enablement team at SAS, and my team focuses on enablement, architecture, and deployment of SAS fraud and security products. They engage closely with delivery partners worldwide by hosting trainings and boot camps to ensure that SAS software can be delivered when purchased by a customer. Additionally, my team functions like a proactive, I call them like a team red, and by that they evaluate software use and help to provide a better return on investment for the customer. My team provides enablement for SAS Visual Investigator, which is a cloud-ready investigation and incident management solution for large data sources. Users of VI can define, create, and manage alerts, perform investigations, and customize their own environment to meet their organizational needs, all within VI, the application. In working with VI, a user can intricately configure entities and case data to fit their personal use cases and preferences. The user can then export the solution configuration into a zip file and import it into a system running Visual Investigator. This import and export feature of VI makes it easy to develop, maintain, and deploy solutions across different hardware. During the configuration design, there are many places that inconsistencies and mistakes can easily be made by the user without their immediate knowledge. The VI application does not validate all configurations before export, and this is crucial, especially not between microservices. So, the user runs into a problem on their end. Enter my team, like the superheroes, to save the day. During these customer health checks for SAS products that my team performs, my team frequently runs into system errors and problems on the user end of VI that are caused by these hidden inconsistencies and misconfigurations. Symptoms of these issues might not be visible immediately, making the issues difficult to diagnose. On top of actual system errors, there are many recommendations for configurations in VI that are best practice, but are frequently forgotten or not known by SAS customers, and even backend users aren't familiar with these best practices. To further the goals of my team, my summer project for the team was to use Python to design a testing framework tool to act as a VI whistleblower and detect and troubleshoot these misconfigurations and malpractices in the Visual Investigator application. Essentially, I worked to make an easy-to-use tool that alerts on configuration conditions that might cause system errors or inconsistencies and conditions that might not be best practice in VI. My team has mostly kept a mental note of the problems they run into during customer checks thus far in its history. My project enumerates these problems people are having as discrete tests for best practice in VI. To run the tool, you can download the project from GitLab, and you can see the link at the bottom of the screen. The Python tool itself comes with a virtual environment that includes all of the necessary dependencies for the project. The testing framework runs on an exported VI config file, so a zip file. You can see the command line prompt for passing the zip file to the tool and running the testing framework at the bottom of this slide as well. There is a README document on the GitLab that includes this information in addition. We chose to base the tests on the config zip file because it allowed for offline development and provided potential for use in tech support. So for example, tech support could ask the VI user that's having problems to send their config file to them, and then tech support could use the tool on the config to determine where problems lie. The testing framework runs individual tests for misconfigurations on the config zip file itself and generates a descriptive HTML report that states whether the config passed or failed each individual test. And this includes suggestions for where and how to fix the problems in the configuration. The screen grab in the center of the screen is what a generated HTML report looks like using this tool, which we will look at in greater depth in just a minute. So let's dive even further into the formal part of this presentation with a VI demonstration. So let's start, I've got a live video, so we'll see what happens. So we have currently a tenant with a configuration in VI uploaded and imported into the tenant. And it's currently the only configuration in the tenant, so it's a pretty clean tenant, and we have one entity person fail in the actual administrative end of VI. If we go to the jobs pane, we can make sure that it is the only thing that is in the tenant because we only have jobs for the actual import of the configuration and entity resolution and data indexing, just getting our entities up to date. So this is the only entity our only configuration we have imported. And if we go into the user end of VI, we can run a search. Let's just run a search for all of the entities that we have on file. We should have one at least, but it looks like we don't have any showing up when we run the search. We run that search through by using the asterisk. Okay, so there must be some problems on our end because if we go back to the administrative end and check out the data indexing that we've performed and looking at the person fail entity that we know we had, we can see that we have read and written two objects. So there definitely should be two results at least that are showing up in the user end when we run that search. The person fail is definitely an entity. So what is going on? Why can't we get any search results? This is where my tool comes into play. So we can run the Python tool on the config zip itself. So we start up the virtual environment using pip env, and there are instructions on how to do this, just this, in the README document on the GitLab. And we go into the virtual environment shell, and we run the command line prompt to get the report from the zip file. And we had a lot of scary errors, but they're difficult to parse through on the terminal, but they're easier to read in the HTML report that gets pulled up. So this is the HTML report that is saved into your file, into your folder itself. And this is what it looks like. It looks like we have 5 failed errors and 3 passed. So we can start looking at these errors to see if we get any insight into what is going on with our system and why it's broken. So each error has a failure comment at the bottom of it. So it says top level entity, person fail, does not have corresponding entity level rules config. Okay, so there's our first error, and this is definitely related to that failure in our search results. So during the import of an entity, VI will not validate that there are search configs for that entity. This test is checking that for each entity that claims to be searchable, which we do have an entity person fail that claims to be searchable, there is in fact a search config for it. This is a common issue at customer sites, particularly when customers pull out configurations and attempt to hand stitch them back together and then move them across environments. And in this event, the customers will likely experience errors when they're indexing. This is just one of the many inconsistencies that are likely to occur on the user end during configuration. And this project creates a space to write tests for each problem to detect them when they occur. When these errors occur, the Python tool can analyze the config to answer the customer's question, why is my system broken and how can I fix it? So we can do just that. If we go back to the administrative end of VI, all we have to do is go into the person fail entity, and rather than being unindexed against all authorizations, we want to add an authorization rule for the SVI users group, like so. And then we save, and we want to go back into the user end and rerun the search, and we should have the entities pop up this time. And we do. Nice, so we've solved that problem. The system's no longer broken. Let's do a different search this time for Lindy, searching for my first name. And we have one result that pops up. Checking out this result, it seems a little lengthy. We have the first line, person 123, Lindy Boostabad, and then underneath that we have name Lindy Boostabad. This is a little redundant in that my name is popping up twice. It's not a problem per se, but it's just for cleanliness that we don't need my name to pop up twice in the search results. So we can go to the Python tool to kind of fix this up for us and see if there's an error that we can use to give us some guidance. Checking out the second error, this is the error comment that we get. Failed entity person failed fields, name field appears in both the label and details config. So this is another problem. So the way the search results are set up is that the top line is called the label. That was the line in blue that we saw. The label field includes information like name, address, and things that identify the record. It doesn't make sense for information in the label field to appear anywhere else in the search results display. Otherwise, the information shown becomes redundant, like we're seeing. In this case, the name field appears in both the label and the details configs and produces the redundant fields. This redundancy likely just occurs due to over-selecting in the administrative window in VI, but we can easily fix this by removing the name field from the details view. So we can do this back in our administrator view of VI. If we go into the person fail entity, and we want to check out the views pane because we want to remove the name field from the detail view. And checking out the detail view panel, we just want to remove the name field from the detail view. And okay. And then we want to save the entity that we've made changes to. And going back to our user end, we want to rerun the search. So checking out that second line, name Lindy Boostabad, it should disappear. And it does. Great, so now we have a little less information that isn't quite so redundant. However, there's more that we can do to streamline the results in this display. So if we check out that last line, it says Lindy Boostabad. So that's my name again, and we don't really need it another time in this search results. It's another error of redundancy. So let's see if there's another error in the HTML report that we can use to kind of clean up these search results even further. Checking out the third error, we see that we have failed entity, person fail, and then failed fields within that entity, person ID and name, label field included in free text searches. Okay, this is a little less obvious case to users. So breaking it down a bit, a field in VI gets indexed 3 different ways by default. The first is when you put the field into the label field. Second, by default, the field itself is indexed. And then third, by default, the field is copied into another field called default, which is very confusing. This copy is what is causing the problem in this case. We don't need the field to be copied because it's already being searched as part of the label field itself. Looking at the search results that we just saw, what we are seeing is that the last line that has my name in quotes is showing because the name is also in the default search field in addition to the label field. We can remove it from the default field, but the way to do this is not obvious. For each of the suggested fields in the report, so we can see person ID and name are the 2 that we're having problems with, we want to set include in free text searches to false. This is not intuitive because you'd think that you'd want to include in free text searches. That makes sense. But instead, the field is already included in free text searches because the system defaults to true. Now, after we remove this setting, the name will be displayed in the label and be searched on in the label, but we won't get the additional line at the bottom. So if we go into the name field here, we just want to set include in free text searches to false. So here we're saying advanced search, include in free text searches, false for both the name and the person ID fields, which we've done. We want to save, and this time we want to make sure we re-index so that we have all of the updated changes to that entity that we've made. So if we go back into the user end of VI and rerun the search for Lindy, if we want to check out that last line, Lindy Boostabad, and then rerun the search, it should disappear, and it did. Awesome. So now we have streamlined the search results as much as we can. Let's run a different search at this time for 1, 2, 3 to see what kind of results we're getting. Okay, we have 2 results that show up. The first one is the 1, 2, 3 is hitting on the person ID. The second one for Donna Hodges is hitting on her social security number. Let's say we want to run instead an advanced search on just person IDs that have 1, 2, 3 in them. So we'll go into person fail, the entity, and we'll go into person ID, and we want to say contains any 1, 2, 3. We don't have any search results that pop up. Why is this? Because we should have had that one that has Lindy Boosted Bad person 1, 2, 3 should be popping up when we do this advanced search. Let's check out the HTML report to see what errors we can maybe look at to get some advice on how to fix this error. We go into the 4th error, and the comment at the bottom says, failed entity, person fail, failed field, person ID field analyzed differently as a field than in the label. Okay, in this case, I mentioned earlier that the things you put in the label field are being searched for as identifiers of that record. However, when you decide to put something in the label field, it gets searched the way the label field gets searched. So the label field gets searched using an analyzer called standard. This works fine when you use normal search like we saw, because the label field is one of the fields that gets consulted. But when you do an advanced search, it searches explicitly on the entered field, and we entered the person ID field. And this field can and often does use a different analyzer than in the label field. In this case, we are not divulging the entire search process to the user. This causes a common inconsistency in behavior that is seen on customer sites, and this test detects that inconsistency so the user can go in and fix the problem. So we'll do that. We'll go back into the person fail entity, and we want to go into the fields that we're having problems on, and we'll go to the person ID field, which our HTML report suggested. We'll go into advanced search. We want to analyze it for advanced search, and we want to just set the analyzer to be the same one as the label field, so standard. Hitting OK. We'll want to save again and re-index the entities, make sure all those changes get updated, and we'll go back into the user end of VI, rerun this advanced search. And we have a result. We have that Lindy Boosted Bad result pops up this time with the advanced search. And it should also work if we rerun that 1, 2, 3 normal search. Both search results now pop up. So they're both being analyzed using the same analyzer, which we fixed the problem. So this tool is great. Lindy, what else can we do to update our VI config files so we're working through best practices in VI? Let's just check out the HTML report and see what other errors we filled. So we check out the 5th error. We look down at the bottom and we see this comment, LDAP user 1, 2, and 3 should not be assigned to group SVI users. All right, in this case, LDAP users should not be assigned to a group. It is best practice to manage individual user membership in LDAP, which are user 1, user 2, and user 3, directly, instead of having your LDAP have the same users as your higher level environment. Essentially, VI users should not be managed inside of the end application, which is VI. You should not be assigning entities, workflows, or jobs to any individual users. If you're building a solution to give to a customer, you want to make sure the solution is portable and decouple the solution from named users as much as possible, instead associating groups for manageability. For example, why would the customer have the exact same users as you during your development? Instead, you should be assigning LDAP groups to the internal custom group in order to get those permissions. So that's where the error is coming from. We have individual users assigned, and we want to just change that. We'll go into the permissions, and we will check out the groups, and we will go into the SVI users group, which was what our HTML report alerted us on. And we just want to remove user 1, user 2, and user 3 from that group. But we want to make sure that we replace them with a group that has all of those users in it, just so they have permissions as a group rather than individually. So we'll just replace them with SAS users. Awesome. So now we should have fixed all of the problems for our config file. So why don't we export the configuration? And this time we want to try to run it back through the Python tool to see if we have passed any of the, or passed all of the tests that the HTML report was alerting us on. So we'll run it in Python tool. I've just downloaded and exported and downloaded the config zip file from VI directly, and we will run it in Python. Here, typing it in and typing in the path where the zip file was saved. We hit enter. And this looks a lot cleaner than the terminal previously. If we pull up the HTML report that gets generated, there's a new HTML report that's generated each time you run it. We have passed all the tests. Awesome. So this was exactly what we wanted. We have cleaned up our config as much as possible, and our VI environment is now aligning with best practices for VI. So back to the overview, there are 8 tests in total that this tool checks and reports back on, and there are more tests waiting to be implemented. The tool has already alerted my team members to several bugs in the way that servers are designed on the deployment end. It's important to note that my project tool does not fix any of the problems that it reports on. That's a disclaimer. Instead, it just alerts the user of the locations and possible fixes for issues in the config file. This tool is highly useful for quick fixes in VI on both the user end and the deployment end. It automates the learning process for VI customers by providing a report, an HTML report that's pretty easily readable, of all the things you might have done wrong during your setup of a configuration in VI, without having to ask a consultant or a middleman. Currently, the testing framework is based on a VI config zip file. And there are several limitations to this because certain configurations are stored solely in Environment Manager console. However, the future applications for this tool might possibly run on a live environment in VI to avoid these limitations. We've discussed uploading this tool to the broader SAS GitHub for use once the testing library is more comprehensive. There's also the possibility of creating an online tool where a config can be uploaded and a report generated back out for suggestions based on the tool. That being said, I am thankful for the opportunity to get this project rolling and create the groundwork for what might be a widely used tool within the VI community in the FSI division in the near future. And that about wraps up the formal section of my presentation. I would love to open the floor up for questions. Thank you all so much.